BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. And yes, today is another Zodiac Killer upload. But first, I would like to drop a little bit of news. The first thing I'd like to say is that we have now assembled our uploads on Gareth Penn and his book Time 17 into a playlist. It's a 6-part series that we have done about Gareth Penn, but we might be adding some uploads into that one in the future. However, the playlist is available on this channel. The second thing I would like to say is we will be beginning our new Zodiac Killer book discussion later this week, and we will be talking about Robert Graysmith and Zodiac Unmasked. That's our next book. I chose this one for a particular reason. I was thinking about doing an upload about Zodiac Unmasked earlier this year because we did one on the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986 by Thomas Henry Horan, which is a very big challenge piece. It's like a companion. It is a debunking and investigative piece that challenges the claims that Robert Graysmith made in his Zodiac book. So I'm thinking, if we're going to be talking about that stuff, why don't we cover all the bases and also mention Robert Graysmith himself and do a book discussion on the claims that he is making in Zodiac Unmasked? So we will be doing that one later this week. Please look out for that. And the next thing to say is, this channel relies on your support. And the best way you can support this channel is not with money, never asking for any financial contributions. We don't have a Patreon for a channel like this. The way you can support this channel is simply by visiting some of our other uploads. I know some people tune in only for the Zodiac Killer stuff, but if you'd like to help out Black Box Online Radio, just check out some uploads on our other topics. In the description box, I've included a link to one we did on Mark Wahlberg. That's right, Mark Wahlberg, the actor. I was listening to a program once, and they said that Mark Wahlberg was once arrested for blinding a man with a metal hook. And I was like, wait a second, is that true? So I did some reading on the subject, and, well, you can listen to the upload to find out. Once again, the link to the upload on the Mark Wahlberg Assault Case is in the description box. Please check it out. And on to today's subject, we're going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer suspect, Kenneth Lester German, sometimes pronounced German. Now, this is one that I found out about because we were mentioning the book The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary L. Stewart, who talks about his father, Earl Van Best, as the Zodiac Killer suspect. That was one of the book discussions we did earlier this year. Earl Van Best was fluent in English, German, and Japanese. He grew up trilingual, pretty much, learning German and Japanese as a kid and carrying them on into his adult years. One thing about that is, there's also a possibility that the reason why the 340 cipher has never been cracked is because it is written in English and Japanese. There are two languages in the 340 cipher. It's just a possibility that someone has proposed. But I began to investigate a little bit more. If, we're going to talk about Earl Van Best, I was like, are there any German language clues in the Zodiac Killer mystery? So I began Googling some things, and instead, I didn't find things about the German language. What I found was there's a suspect named German, Kenneth Lester German, sometimes pronounced German. And with Kenneth Lester German, the big person who's promoting this one is his grandson, Phillip Powers. And I was just like, how appropriate to discover it at that time. You have Gary Stewart saying his biological father is the Zodiac. Now you have Phillip Powers saying his grandfather is the Zodiac. Nice transition from father to grandfather. And is that just what this is? Is that just somebody following a template, somebody using this as the model? Oh, my family member is the Zodiac Killer. Except now we're not dealing with people who are saying it's their father. They're saying it's their grandfather. It's the template for a new generation. It's the model for a new age demographic. Is that what we're dealing with here? Well, first I can say that there are many people who say that their family member was the Zodiac Killer. Jack Torrance is a suspect that has been viewed just that same way. His stepson was the person who was promoting that theory. Jack Torrance is one of the suspects that I never did an upload on because I just thought that it was so implausible. I didn't want to, I didn't feel it was even worthy of the time, but I really should retract that because I have done some perhaps more frivolous Zodiac Killer suspects in the past, like Ted Cruz. But about Kenneth Lester German, I was actually kind of disappointed that there were so few articles about this, because most of it comes to us from the Davis Enterprise and another one called the Daily Republic that are talking about Kenneth Lester German as a Zodiac Killer suspect. But so one of the things that people were advising to do is to get on Phillip Powers' Twitter page, and you can see some of the claims that he is making and some of the stuff that he is talking about. What he is centering his theory on is the confession that Kenneth Lester German made when Phillip Powers was a kid. But a big thing with that is Phillip Powers did not hear the confession. It was made to his sister. His sister heard it and was like, no, that was not a serious thing. He was just making a joke. And the family has actually spoken out against Phillip Powers and saying, no, Kenneth Lester German was not the Zodiac Killer. We do not believe this. We do not agree with this. But I would say that Phillip's mother did provide a DNA sample so they can kind of test it against some of the DNA that was collected from the Zodiac. And they can see, any conclusive findings one way or another. But if you're going to entertain the multiple killers theory, that would always leave the door open. We're going to go to the article now from the Davis Enterprise, and we're going to look at this one. It's written by Todd R. Hansen from McNaughton Newspapers, just citing the source. A Dixon, California man believes his grandfather was the notorious Zodiac Killer, and he and his mother have provided DNA samples to compare as possible familial matches. I believe my grandfather, Kenneth Lester German, did it because he matches the description, said Phillip Powers, who has provided to the Solano County Sheriff's Office photos, writing samples, and other items he believes links his grandfather to the killings that occurred in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Pay attention to that date, the early 1970s. It is going to come up later. I'm just interjecting right there. And including several in Solano County. Those items include DNA swabs that were taken by the sheriff's office and just one of several agencies that have independent investigations into the serial killings. We did collect some items, and we did take some DNA samples that we will be providing to the Vallejo Police Department, confirmed Sergeant Dax West. Dax West said the sheriff's office does not have any DNA evidence from the Zodiac, so there would be nothing to compare with the Powers sample. Well, that's true. That may be true, but we do know that, of course, there should be DNA findings that are preserved once they do some sort of interdepartmental work. However, the Vallejo police have envelopes believed to be the killer's DNA on them, as do the San Francisco Police Department, which developed the first genetic profile for the serial killer in 2002. So you've heard some of the big things that he says there. Number one, the confession. Number two, handwriting. And you have to go onto Phillip Powers' Twitter page to find some things that he is sharing about that. I don't see it here in this article comparing the handwriting samples. I would say that one thing that Phillip Powers posted really bothered me about trying to use it in terms of a handwriting comparison. The sample that he has from Kenneth Lester German was written in all caps, like all capital letters, uppercase. And the sample that he compared to from the Zodiac Killer was written, with uppercase and lowercase letters, the way we would normally write the English language. So I'm like, hey, I don't know if that's the most practical way to compare the handwriting. But I can say, though, Kenneth Lester German's handwriting does tilt to the left, tilt to the right, actually, tilt to the right, the same way that the Zodiac Killer's did. I thought that was really interesting. And I do see some similarities in their handwriting, but I just thought it was a very misleading sample that Phillip Powers provided. Another thing that stood out to me, and this is one thing that I don't typically look for when I'm on Twitter, is that the Twitter page that was run by Phillip Powers talking about his grandfather being the Zodiac Killer was only active for about 6 weeks. You can see that it was started in May of 2018, and the final post was at the end of June in 2018. So I was like, wow, he was really only promoting this for about 6 weeks. Did he give up and get bored with it or something like that? But I really don't know. I mean, not a complete mind reader on that, but I just think that's a very small amount of time to be promoting this. And it also really just surprised me that there were people talking on the forums about Kenneth Lester German, sure, but it really didn't receive a lot of coverage, so perhaps this was something that Phillip Powers abandoned. But to give a little bit more detail about the confession that took place when Phillip Powers was a kid, the confession of Kenneth Lester German being the Zodiac Killer. According to Powers, German made the confession to one of his 4 daughters, Kay Nelson, when she was a young girl. That story could not be confirmed as Nelson could not be reached for a comment. Okay, so please excuse me when I said that it was Philip's sister. It's actually his aunt. Please excuse me, just dropping a confession there. She took it as a joke, Powers said. Well, I mean, that's even the guy promoting the theory saying his aunt took it as a joke. Not everyone in the family supports Powers' theory or his efforts to prove what he believes. In fact, he admits some of his relatives are very upset with the investigation. Well, I mean, what do you think about that? Powers is motivated on several levels. He said not the least of which is his own diagnosis of having bipolar disorder. I want to know if I got it from him, Powers said. Um, well, bipolar, was the Zodiac bipolar? We could probably do a whole upload on that, but I think that is a very bizarre way to insert that possibility into the mix here. I would just say that that's a very bizarre insertion by Phillip Powers. But Phillip Powers also believes the families of the Zodiac victims deserve closure. I completely agree. And he is convinced that there may be more bodies that are currently known and possibly located on what was once the family property in Swayson Valley Road. Swayson is spelled S-U-I-S-U-N. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay. The Zodiac wrote something called The Exorcist Letter. And what Phillip Powers is going to be saying about that is that there are clues in the Exorcist letter that tie to this property on Swayson Valley Road. And he's saying that he knows where it is. He knows what the Zodiac was talking about because the Zodiac was his family member, his grandfather. Another thing, as a piece of evidence that Phillip Powers puts forward is he says that his grandfather, Kenneth Lester German, matches the physical description of the Zodiac Killer. And I looked at some of the photos that he provided, and there's one photo in particular that is used many times. Even if you were to Google Kenneth Lester German Zodiac Killer, maybe it would come up. It's a photo of Kenneth Lester German standing on the other side of a car. That's the best way I can describe it. But it's about 6 feet away. And I'm like, I think it's a little bit, once again, not the best way to compare somebody's physicality to the composite sketch or even to the descriptions of what we're hearing from the Zodiac Killer, or about the Zodiac Killer, rather, from a photo that's 6 feet away. It's like you can't even make out the specific features. Once again, I don't find that the most convincing. Powers said he remembers distinctly how upset his grandfather was when he was playing in one of the landfills, though he admits his grandfather may have just been concerned for his safety. Why would you have a need to report that? There are specifics about the houses that were mentioned in the Zodiac letter. Powers believes they are referenced in the Zodiac letters, but those assertions are speculative at best. All right, well, there is something we can just sort of say there, and the article does go on for a little bit, but I would just say that the big things that he has put forward, as we said, handwriting, physical descriptions, and a confession that was made to his aunt. Please excuse me for saying that it was made to Phillip Powers' sister earlier on. I mean, with this one, I mean, are we just going to have countless people saying that they have a family member who was the Zodiac Killer? I mean, where's the hard piece of physical evidence? Where is it? You know, like, I mean, I know he might think that he inherited bipolar disorder from his grandfather. Maybe that's even true. But what does that have to do with the Zodiac Killer mystery? And a lot of people are questioning the Zodiac psychological profile, and they're saying that, is this some guy that was on and off of medication? That's been something that we've talked about a lot, especially when you're mentioning someone like the suspect, Ross Sullivan. But, I mean, with Kenneth Lester German, once again, I was really disappointed that there weren't more people talking about him as a possible suspect, you know, just to cross-reference different articles and such. I mean, the possibility of him having anything to do with this would be extraordinarily low. I would say that the biggest piece of evidence that Phillip Powers would have to put forward that to support his claim was the handwriting. I mean, it does have that odd tilt, and I can see direct similarities. You know, a lot of people do have similar handwriting to the Zodiac Killer and some of the letters. I mean, that was how the stuff about Ross Sullivan really took off, because people were saying that what stuff is centered on handwriting. The theory that vilifies Ross Sullivan is about handwriting, but it's also about Ross's personality and perhaps some other specifics. I mean, we've done multiple uploads on Ross Sullivan, and there are other things. It's not just the handwriting. I would say, though, that Kenneth Lester German's handwriting was a lot more convincing than Earl Van Best, because after the book The Most Dangerous Animal of All, there was another one that was written by Michael Waxel, am I getting that name right? Which was called The End of the Zodiac, that was talking about some other things about Earl Van Best being the Zodiac Killer, and we pulled up his website once, and that was when we did our first Earl Van Best upload, and if you do listen to our Earl Van Best playlist, it is pinned at the bottom. It's like the unofficial 10th part of the playlist, it's pinned in there. I didn't see any similarity at all. I was like, no way. Like, genuinely, no flippin' way. Like, I mean, I just didn't see it. But one of the more interesting things about Phillip Powers is he claims that he and his family members knew Donna Lass, and that, like, he can say that Donna Lass was in his house, they knew her, he can tell you where Donna Lass has been, and that's going to be another case we really haven't mentioned too much on the channel, but Donna Lass could tie into some other things regarding the Zodiac Killer. But what I would say about this is, Phillip Powers, if I recall, was born in 1978, so it's like he must be going off of stories that people have told him about Donna Lass, and I'm saying that because that was what was posted on his Twitter page. I was about to write to him to reach out and to ask him if he would like to come on to this show here just to talk about the Zodiac Killer and Kenneth Lester German, or anything that he would want to say about the Zodiac, but I didn't send the message because he hadn't tweeted from that account since, as we said, June of 2018, and I was like, wow, this thing must not be active anymore. But when I think he's talking about Donna Lass, he must be relying on stories or possibly even photographs saying that his family had a connection to her. And if anything, we're just trying to lay some stuff out here. I have to be very clear with you. I do not really believe this guy was the Zodiac Killer, but he is a suspect that people have been talking about. Some people, very few people, and I only thought that it was, fair for us to try and talk about this subject. The big thing, though, that struck me is, I was looking into a case, where somebody is saying that his father was the Zodiac. Now he's saying his grandfather was the Zodiac. So it's like, Gary Stewart saying it's his father, Phillip Powers is saying it's his grandfather. It's like the torch has been passed. The next generation is making this legend their own. And I really hope that's not the case, because one time we were discussing an article from Mel Magazine where they said that people want to keep the Zodiac Killer legend alive. That's why they were saying that Ted Cruz was the Zodiac Killer. Obviously, Ted Cruz wasn't the Zodiac Killer. He was born 2 years after the first murder was committed. But it's just like, they want to say that stuff because they enjoy the chase rather than the cats. They want to keep the hunt going. I hope that at some point we can say case closed and we will find out the answers in this case, but we're never going to get them all. Even if you can say who committed the murders, how do you crack the ciphers? Even if you can find out the Zodiac's identity, who was aiding and abetting him? Was the San Francisco Chronicle helping out? Did he have connections in the police department that were covering things up or bossing the investigation and using their administrative power to make that stuff disappear? In our lifetimes, we will never get all the answers, but we might get some of them. Look at the Golden State Killer, for example. But what I would say with this one is just that I think that it's very disingenuous if people are using certain templates and certain models and just being like, okay, I'm going to compose this narrative on how my family member was the Zodiac Killer, because it's just like, even before you do that, even if you think that that's true, think about how many times that has been done before. And I would hope people like Phillip Powers are going to be like, wait a second, am I just recycling somebody else's narrative as opposed to coming up with some genuine insights and observations about a Zodiac Killer suspect? I mean, I'm accepting that everything Phillip Powers has said is 100% truthful. I'm going to give him that type of benefit of the doubt. But the thing is that what he's doing? Recycling a narrative that my family member's the Zodiac Killer, and all right, maybe he has some similarities, even though it's a photo of a man in glasses taken from 6 feet away. Probably 15 or 20 feet away and zoomed in, the way it looks like. Okay, so he had short hair and glasses. Does that make him the Zodiac Killer? I don't think so, but I would really love to hear what you have to say about the Zodiac and any of the claims that I have made in this upload here on Kenneth Lester German as a Zodiac Killer suspect. If you have anything to say at all about the Zodiac, please drop a comment below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. But until next time.